My wife had been dead for less than 2 hours when her billionaire boss called me during her funeral. His voice didn't sound sad. It sounded afraid. He said, "Harold, I found something. Come to my office, right now." Then he paused, and what he said next made the blood drain from my face. "Don't tell your son or your daughter-in-law. You could be in danger." I thought losing my wife would be the worst day of my life. I was wrong, because before the sun went down that evening, I would learn that the people I loved most had been hiding something so monstrous it would destroy my family forever. If you've ever trusted someone with your whole heart, only to discover they were quietly betraying you, then this story is going to stay with you. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you love stories where the truth wins in the end, hit like and subscribe, because this isn't just a story about loss. It's about the moment a grieving husband realizes his wife saved his life after she was already gone. My name is Harold Doyle. I'm 61 years old. For 33 years I repaired diesel engines in a truck shop off Brook Park Road in Cleveland. Grease under my fingernails became so normal that even after scrubbing my hands 3 times, Diane could still laugh and say, "You'll always smell like motor oil." She'd wrinkle her nose dramatically before kissing me anyway. That's who she was. She found reasons to smile where everyone else saw inconvenience. We were married 34 years. People always ask what the secret was. There wasn't one. We argued, we struggled, we worried about bills, we raised a stubborn son, we buried our parents. We celebrated anniversaries we couldn't really afford. Life wasn't perfect, but every night, no matter how angry we were, we went to bed holding hands. Then one Sunday morning, that hand disappeared forever. The funeral took place 9 days later. Cold October rain drifted across the cemetery like smoke, not heavy enough for umbrellas, just enough to soak your shoulders without you realizing it. I barely heard the pastor speaking. Words like faith, peace, eternal rest. They floated past me without meaning anything. My eyes stayed fixed on Diane's casket. I kept expecting someone to wake me up. Any second now she'd call me from the kitchen, asking if I wanted another cup of coffee. Any second. But reality doesn't care what you're ready for. Nearly 40 people attended. Neighbors, old co-workers, family. Richard Holloway sat quietly in the back. He owned Holloway Properties, one of the biggest commercial real estate companies in northern Ohio. Most people assumed Diane worked for him. That wasn't true. Richard depended on her. She'd been his executive assistant for 24 years. Sometimes I'd joke that she ran the company while Richard just signed papers. He'd laugh, then admit I wasn't entirely wrong. Then there was my son Kyle, 32 years old, sitting beside his wife Vanessa. Something bothered me immediately, not because they weren't crying. Everyone grieves differently. It was something else. Kyle kept checking his watch. Vanessa kept glancing at her phone under the funeral program. Every few minutes they'd lean toward each other and whisper, not comforting whispers. Business whispers, fast, focused, almost impatient. At first I told myself I was imagining it. Grief makes you suspicious. Grief makes everything feel wrong, so I ignored it. I wish I hadn't. At exactly 11:52, my phone vibrated. I almost silenced it. Then I saw the caller ID Richard Holloway. During the funeral? That alone was strange. Richard respected boundaries. He would have waited unless something couldn't wait. I stepped quietly into the hallway. The church doors closed behind me. Everything became silent except distant organ music. "Harold." His voice cracked. Not loudly, just enough for me to know something terrible had happened. I found something. My stomach tightened. "What?" "I need you to come to my office." "Richard, what is it?" Silence. Then, not over the phone. His breathing sounded uneven. "Come immediately. I'll come after the burial." "No." His voice sharpened. Now, I swallowed, then came the sentence that changed my life. And Harold, don't tell Kyle. My heartbeat stopped. Or Vanessa. I frowned. What are you talking about? Another pause. Longer this time, then quietly. You could be in danger. The line went dead. I stood frozen in that hallway. Danger? From who? Richard wasn't dramatic. He wasn't the kind of man who exaggerated if he sounded frightened. There was a reason. Suddenly, memories started replaying themselves inside my head. Tiny moments, moments I'd dismissed, moments that no longer felt small. Over the last year, Kyle and Vanessa had started visiting much more often. At first it seemed sweet. Wednesday dinners, weekend breakfasts, offers to help around the house. Vanessa especially. She insisted on organizing Diane's medications every Tuesday and Friday. She bought labeled pill containers, color-coded reminders, printed schedules. She said older people often forgot doses. Diane appreciated it. So did I. It felt thoughtful. Now, standing alone in that church hallway, I remembered something I'd buried in the back of my mind. One afternoon, I'd come home early from work. Vanessa stood alone in our kitchen. The weekly pill organizer lay open. Little white tablets covered the counter. Diane was asleep on the couch. Middle of the afternoon. That never happened. Vanessa smiled. Oh, good. You're home early. She closed the organizer almost too quickly. Diane got tired after her walk. I accepted the explanation. Why wouldn't I? She was family. 3 days before Diane died, she'd asked me something strange. Harold, do you remember signing those papers? What papers? The power of attorney forms. I frowned. I never signed anything. She looked confused. I could have sworn Kyle said we already did. We laughed it off. Mirror gets fuzzy after 60, or so we thought. Now, those words echoed differently. Power of attorney. Why would Kyle even bring that up? The funeral continued without me for several minutes. When I finally returned, I couldn't hear anything the pastor said. Every sentence Richard had spoken replayed inside my head. Don't tell your son. You're in danger. Danga. Dang-danga. When the service ended, people gathered outside preparing to drive to the cemetery. Kyle walked over. You okay, Dad? He sounded concerned. Maybe he was. Maybe everything Richard said was somehow a misunderstanding. I've got some insurance paperwork to sort out, I lied. I'll meet everyone afterward. Kyle shrugged. Whatever you need. Vanessa barely looked at me. She was already walking across the parking lot. Pan pressed against her ear, talking quickly. Her heels clicked across the wet pavement. She never once looked back toward Diane's casket. That image stayed with me. It still does. I climbed into my old grey F-150, the truck Diane always teased me about replacing. It'll die someday. So will I. I'll replace neither. She laughed every time. Now the passenger seat was empty. For the first time in 34 years, the silence inside that truck felt unbearable. Downtown Cleveland blurred past the windshield. Traffic lights, pedestrians, glass office towers. I remembered every Christmas party Diane dragged me to, every fundraiser. Every anniversary dinner Richard insisted employees attend. She loved working there. She always said, if something ever happened to me, Richard would make sure you were okay. At the time, I'd laughed. Now, those words felt prophetic. I parked beneath Holloway Properties at exactly 12:40, straightened my tie, walked inside. Security recognized me immediately. Mr. Doyle, 14th floor. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. Then movement outside caught my eye. A black Nissan Altima swung recklessly into the loading zone. I knew that car, Kyle. I stepped back behind a marble pillar, watched him jump out. He wasn't walking, he was running. His face looked nothing like it had at the funeral. Not grief, panic, real panic. He hurried to the reception desk and leaned across the counter, talking fast, pointing upstairs. The receptionist shook her head, picked up the phone. Kyle ran both hands through his hair. He looked desperate, like someone trying to beat a clock. A cold chill crawled up my spine. Richard had told me not to tell Kyle, yet somehow Kyle was already here, trying to reach him first. One thought entered my mind, and refused to leave. How did he know? I waited until Kyle looked away, then slipped into the elevator unnoticed. The doors closed. My reflection stared back at me in the polished steel. For the first time, I wasn't grieving, I was afraid. When the elevator doors opened, Richard Holloway was already waiting. His normally perfect suit was wrinkled. His tie loosened. He looked like he hadn't slept. The moment he saw me, he exhaled. Thank God. Before I could speak, he asked one question. Did you see him downstairs? I nodded slowly. My son. Richard closed his eyes. Damn it. What is happening? He glanced toward the hallway to make sure nobody else was nearby. Then he leaned closer. I accidentally called your home phone this morning before reaching your cell. So? Vanessa answered. My stomach tightened. I only mentioned Diane left paperwork with me. I never told her what it was. But 30 minutes later, he looked toward the elevator. Your son showed up demanding to see me. Richard's expression hardened. Harold, I think they were trying to get here before you. He slowly reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a plain manila envelope, and placed it gently on the desk between us. Across the front, written in Diane's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words, for Harold only. If anything happens to me, I stopped breathing. I stared at the envelope for what felt like an eternity. It wasn't just the handwriting, it was the pressure of the pen. I'd watched Diane write grocery lists, birthday cards, little notes tucked into my lunchbox for over 3 decades. I knew every curve of her letters, every loop in the way she wrote my name. This wasn't rushed, it wasn't panicked, it was deliberate. Like she'd accepted something terrible and had decided she wasn't going to let it win. Richard quietly pushed the envelope toward me. I haven't read the letter. You were the only person she wanted to. My fingertips trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a folded letter. Behind it, taped carefully to the paper, was a small flash drive. I unfolded the letter. The first line hit me harder than the funeral ever had. Harold, if you're reading this, something happened before I could stop it. The room disappeared. It was just me and her words. First, I need you to know this. I love you. None of this is your fault. You trusted the people we raised and welcomed into our home, because that's the kind of man you've always been. Please don't ever blame yourself for that. By the second paragraph, my vision blurred. I wasn't crying loudly. The tears simply fell. Silent, heavy, the kind that don't ask permission. The letter continued. I've noticed money disappearing from our retirement account. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. When I asked Kyle about it, he smiled and told me I must have forgotten authorizing the transfers. But Harold, I know my own memory. Something isn't right. My chest tightened. Money? What money? I handled repairs. She handled the finances. Always had, because she was better at it than I ever was. Then came another sentence. I found a power of attorney filed with our bank. It has both our signatures. I signed nothing, and I'm almost certain you didn't either. I looked up at Richard. I never signed anything. He nodded. I know. Keep reading. The next page became darker, not in color, in meaning. I've been feeling strange for weeks, foggy, weak, like my heart can't decide whether to race or stop. The doctor keeps adjusting my medication. But something keeps telling me this isn't my medication causing it. I felt every hair on my arm stand up. She knew. Some part of her had known. Then, one sentence nearly stopped my heart. Please watch Vanessa when she handles my pills. I remembered the kitchen, the organizer, the afternoon nap, the smile, the pills spread across the counter. My stomach turned. Richard slowly slid his laptop toward me. There's more. He plugged in the flash drive. 3 folders appeared. Nothing dramatic, no secret passwords. Just 3 ordinary folders, which somehow made them feel even more horrifying. The first folder contained bank statements, heisted, organized every transaction, marked by Diane herself, 4 withdrawals, June, Julie, August. September, $61,000, transferred from our retirement account. Destination, Kyle and Vanessa. I stared, not because of the money, because I hadn't noticed, not once. What kind of father doesn't notice? The words escaped my mouth before I realized I'd spoken them. Richard answered quietly. The kind who trusted his family. The second folder opened. Photographs. Prescription bottles, pharmacy receipts, handwritten notes, every bottle carefully compared against pharmacy records. Different pill counts, different dosages, extra tablets. Tablets that shouldn't have been there. Diane had circled them in red ink, beside one picture she'd written. These weren't prescribed to me. My breathing became shallow. Richard clicked the third folder. I should warn you. I wish I could. It contained screenshot smalls, one conversation, Vanessa, and someone saved simply as Danny. The first message read, "She's starting to ask questions about the account." My heartbeat echoed inside my ears. Danny replied, "Then stop letting her think." Another message, "She's getting suspicious." Danny answered, "Increase the dose slowly. Nobody questions heart problems at her age." The room went completely silent. I couldn't move, couldn't blink, couldn't breathe. Everything inside me seemed to stop. My wife hadn't simply died. Someone had been waiting for her to. Richard reached over and quietly closed the laptop. Harold. I think Diane figured it out before anyone else. And I think she knew she might not have much time. I looked toward the window. Lake Erie stretched across the horizon, beautiful, peaceful, completely indifferent to the fact that my entire life had just collapsed. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. What do we do? Richard didn't hesitate. We don't confront them. I frowned. What? If they're willing to steal $61,000, if they're willing to forge legal documents, he paused. We have to assume they're capable of worse. The sentence landed like concrete. That afternoon, Richard called someone he trusted, Frank Delgado, retired homicide detective, now a private investigator. Frank arrived carrying nothing except a worn leather notebook. No dramatic entrance, no speeches. He simply listened, read every document twice, studied every message, then folded his hands. I've seen people kill for less than this. The room fell silent again. Frank pointed toward the laptop. This proves financial fraud. It suggests poisoning. But suggestions don't send people to prison. We need them talking. Richard nodded. What do you suggest? Frank looked directly at me. I need you to do something almost impossible. He leaned forward. I need you to pretend that you know absolutely nothing. Those words hurt more than I expected, because pretending meant sitting across from my own son, knowing he might have helped kill his mother, smiling, nodding, sharing meals, listening to lies. Every instinct inside me wanted to scream. Instead, I agreed. 2 nights later, Frank installed hidden cameras inside my house, one inside a smoke detector. Another hidden inside an antique clock Diane had loved. It felt wrong, like invading our own home. Then I remembered. Someone else had invaded it first. The following Monday, I returned home. Kyle hugged me, long, tight. I'm worried about you, Dad. His voice sounded sincere, too sincere. Vanessa placed a casserole on the kitchen counter. I know you're not eating enough. She smiled exactly the way she always had, warm, gentle, decent. I finally understood something terrifying. Monsters rarely look like monsters. Sometimes they bring dinner for 11 days. I played my part. I laughed when appropriate, talked about funeral paperwork, asked about their business. Every single conversation felt like swallowing broken glass. Every night, I'd sit alone in Diane's chair after they left, apologizing out loud. "I'm trying, I promise, I'm trying." Then, on the 12th night, everything changed. I told Kyle I wasn't feeling well. "I'm going upstairs early." He nodded. "Get some sleep, Dad." I climbed halfway up the staircase, then quietly stopped. Frank had told me, "Don't actually sleep, wait." 40 minutes later, the cameras captured exactly what we'd hoped for. Kyle and Vanessa remained at the kitchen table, wine glasses half empty, thinking they were alone. Vanessa leaned back. "The retirement money's completely transferred." Kyle nodded. "Good. Now we just need him to agree to sell the house." She smiled. "Then we're finished. And we won't even need the power of attorney anymore." Kyle chuckled. Then he said the sentence that destroyed whatever remained of my heart. "Just don't get sloppy like you did with Mom." Vanessa laughed. Actually laughed, then shrugged. "Nobody double-checks an old woman's heart medication." Silence, then laughter. More laughter. I covered my mouth, not to stop myself crying, to stop myself screaming. Frank called less than an hour later. "We've got them." For the first time since Diane died, I believed justice might actually happen. The next morning, Frank called before the sun came up. I answered on the second ring. His voice carried something I hadn't heard since this nightmare began. Confidence. "Harold," he said, "don't let them know anything's changed." "But we're ready." I looked out my kitchen window. The maple tree Diane planted 20 years earlier was losing its leaves. Orange, gold red. She used to say trees weren't dying in autumn. They're just letting go of what they don't need anymore. For the first time since her funeral, I understood exactly what she meant. Maybe it was finally time for me to let go too, not of Diane, of the lie I'd been living, the lie that my son was still the little boy who used to run into my arms after scraping his knee. That boy was gone. The man sitting across my dinner table every week was someone I no longer recognized. Over the next 4 days, everything moved quietly. Frank obtained the pharmacy records, every refill, every dosage. Every signature. One pharmacist remembered Vanessa specifically, not because she seemed suspicious, but because she'd insisted on picking up Diane's medication herself almost every time. There were multiple early refill requests, requicks no doctor had approved. Then came the forensic handwriting report. The signatures on the power of attorney weren't mine. They weren't Diane's. They'd been traced, every stroke, every loop, every letter. Copied carefully from old greeting cards and legal documents, Frank placed the report on Richard's desk, then looked at me. "We've got fraud." He paused. "We've got financial exploitation." Another pause. "And if the toxicology confirms what we suspect." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. 3 days later, the coroner approved Diane's exhumation. I never imagined I'd have to sign paperwork allowing my wife's grave to be opened. My hands shook so badly, I could barely hold the pen. It felt like I was betraying her. Richard quietly rested a hand on my shoulder. "No, this is how we protect her now." The toxicology results arrived 48 hours later. Frank didn't tell me over the phone. He came to the house himself. Richard came too. Neither one spoke while they walked inside. That silence said everything. Frank laid the report on my kitchen table. Diane had dangerously elevated levels of heart medication, far beyond her prescription. There is no medical explanation, only one. Someone had been increasing her dosage, slowly, carefully, long enough that everyone believed her heart was simply failing naturally. I lowered my head. My shoulders began to shake, not from anger, not even from grief, from the unbearable realization that the woman I'd promised to protect had been fighting for her life inside her own home, while I sat 10 feet away, believing everything was fine. Frank let me have those few minutes. Then he quietly said, "It's time." We decided not to arrest them immediately. Frank wanted something else, a confession, not forced, not manipulated, given freely. He already had enough evidence. But he wanted them to expose themselves completely. Richard smiled slightly. I think Diane would have appreciated that. The perfect opportunity came sooner than expected, the reading of Diane's will. Thursday morning, 10 o'clock, Attorney Patricia Wynn's office. Kyle and Vanessa never questioned it. Why would they? As far as they knew, their plan had worked perfectly. They believed I was grieving. Broken, easy to manipulate, exactly the way they'd planned. The morning of the meeting, Vanessa hugged me. She actually hugged me. "I'm proud of you, Harold. I know Diane would be too." I looked over her shoulder. My eyes caught Richard's across the parking lot. He gave the smallest nod. It was time. Patricia welcomed everyone into the conference room. Kyle looked relaxed, almost cheerful. Vanessa crossed her legs confidently, already imagining the house, the retirement money, the future they'd stolen. Patricia began reading the legal formalities, then looked toward me. "Mr. Doyle, before we continue, is there anything you'd like to add?" I stood slowly. Every eye followed me. I took one deep breath, then answered, "Actually, there is." I turned toward the door. "Richard." The conference room door opened. Richard Holloway walked inside, carrying his laptop. Behind him, Frank Delgado. Behind Frank, 2 Cleveland detectives. The smile disappeared from Vanessa's face instantly. Kyle stopped breathing. "What is this?" Richard didn't answer. Neither did Frank. Instead, Richard placed the laptop on the conference table, pressed play. The kitchen appeared on screen. Kyle, Vanessa, wine glasses. Their voices filled the room, crystal clear. "The retirement money's transferred. Once he sells the house, we won't need the power of attorney anymore." Kyle laughed. Then came the sentence, "Just don't get sloppy like you did with Mom." Silence. Vanessa laughed. That horrible laugh. Nobody double-checks an old woman's heart medication. Nobody in the room moved. The recording continued, every word, every laugh, every confession. When it ended, the silence was deafening. Vanessa shot to her feet. "This is edited. That's not what we meant." Frank calmly removed his badge. "It's authentic. The forensic lab already confirmed that." She looked toward Kyle Meaching desperately for help. He never looked back. He simply stared at the table. Like a little boy caught stealing cookies. Except this wasn't cookies. This was his mother's life. One detective stepped forward. "Kyle Doyle, Vanessa Doyle, you are under arrest." Vanessa screamed, actually screamed. "You can't prove murder," Frank answered quietly. "We don't have to. The toxicology already did." The color drained from her face. She collapsed back into her chair. Kyle finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears. "Dad," his voice cracked. "I never wanted her to die. It wasn't supposed to happen. It was just supposed to." He couldn't finish. I looked at him, really looked at him, not as my son, as a man, a stranger wearing my son's face. Then I spoke, quietly, calmly, the way Diane always had. "Your mother spent 34 years loving you. She skipped vacations so you could go to college. She worked overtime so you could have your first car. She defended you when everyone else said you'd made another mistake." I paused. My voice never rose. "And you repaid her by counting the days until you owned her house." Kyle broke. He buried his face in his hands, not because he was innocent, because he finally understood. There wasn't a lie left to hide behind. The detectives handcuffed them both. Vanessa fought. Kyle didn't. As they led him toward the door, he turned back one final time. "Dad, I'm sorry." I nodded slowly. "I know, but you're apologizing because you got caught, not because you stopped." Those were the last words I ever spoke to my son. The trials lasted months. Kyle accepted a plea agreement, financial exploitation, forgery, conspiracy, 4 years in prison. Vanessa wasn't as fortunate. The toxicology report, the pharmacy records, the forged documents, the recorded confession. Together they painted one devastating picture. The jury deliberated less than 5 hours. She was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, along with multiple fraud charges. 11 years. Danny, the pharmacy technician, turned out to be Vanessa's cousin. He admitted diverting medication for months. He's serving his own sentence today. People ask me whether justice brought peace. No, justice doesn't erase memories. It doesn't bring your wife home. It doesn't let you hear her laugh one more time. Justice simply stops evil from writing the ending. Peace comes later, slowly, quickly, one sunrise at a time. Richard and I still have lunch every month. Sometimes we don't even talk about the case. Sometimes we just sit, drink coffee, and remember Diane. He once told me something she used to say at work. Harold always thinks ordinary people can't change the world, but he changes mine every day. I'd never heard those words before. I cried harder hearing that than I did during the trial. I still live in our house. I never sold it. Every Sunday morning, I make 2 cups of coffee. Habit. One stays untouched beside Diane's favorite chair. Maybe that's silly. Maybe it isn't. It reminds me that love doesn't disappear just because someone does. I also created a scholarship in Diane's name for families struggling with cardiac care. Every student who receives it hears her story, not how she died, but how brave she was. How even when she believed someone wanted to silence her, she found a way to protect the people she loved, even after she was gone. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is preparing someone for the day you won't be there. Diane saved my life, not by fighting back with anger, not with revenge, but with truth. Truth that waited patiently until the exact moment I needed it most. Would you have done if you were in Harold's shoes? Would you have forgiven your own child? Or would betrayal like this be impossible to come back from? If you enjoy emotional stories about betrayal, justice, and karma, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And remember, sometimes the loudest revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply making sure the truth is the last thing standing.